Alright. Hey everybody. So my name is Nikhil. I'm from University of Guelph-Humber. But before I get started, I just wanted to get a count here. How many of you work at higher ed or government organization? Okay. How many for multinationals or big companies? Okay. A weird question. How many work for two publicly funded companies or two higher eds? Nobody? How many work for three higher eds? No? Okay, so all these weird questions is to say, I work at three institutions. I work at University of Guelph, Humber College, and University of Guelph-Humber. That's what it is. That's what University of Guelph-Humber is. And so, as you can imagine, every institution has its own IT infrastructure, its own architecture, its own designs, etc. How do you deal with it if you have to deal with three of them? Of course, you guys have probably handled projects where we are dealing with multiple different departments, and it's already hard to deal with departments within your institutions, but now you have to deal with departments in three institutions. That's where we come in, and 2 years ago I took on this position. So my name is Nikhil. I took on the position of at University of Guelph-Humber for Manager of Enterprise Systems. And then one of the first projects that came through was to transform the digital landscape of Guelph-Humber. Basically saying, change everything that we have and make it look new. So to go with that, one of the first things we did was to assess all the different data that's flowing through, look at all the operations that are happening at Guelph-Humber, see all the communications that are sent through, how data is flowing between these three organizations and done securely, and how do we utilize it for efficiency, etc. And on top of all of that, build a new website. Okay, so from that, we came up with the following objectives to say, if you're doing this digital transformation, it's built around these objectives. One, we need to make sure that we are at an efficient state at the end of this project, making sure that every department, everyone is centralized, and everybody's making the best use of its time, best use of the tools, best use of everything that we have. Data integration. We want to make sure that because we have multiple institutions, it's hard to replicate data and then still keep it secure, still keep it valid, still keep it integral. So what we decided is we are not going to recreate the truth authoritative source. Source needs to be its source, that is why we call it authoritative, but we will use it to integrate with all of this. So we created a data integration tool that will basically collaborate or integrate with all of these different institutions. So we have two ERPs to work with, we have two communication channels to work with, while keeping all the data there and all the content in its own place, but also integrate with us so the data flows properly. We also wanted to make sure that the collaboration works. So basically, we want to equip the community because we have so many different organizations, so many different departments. Everybody works in their own different departments in isolation. We wanted to make sure that we are one community, we are one Guelph-Humber, that everybody comes together and collaborates in one space. So that's where we created a collaboration unit called our digital community. And then, moreover, if you've seen how Guelph-Humber looked 2 years ago, it would look like we were in the 1970s. So we changed that and made sure that we have a really great user experience, that no matter what kind of user you are, if you're 10 years old or you're 70 years old, you can all use our technology and be satisfied with it. And lastly, we wanted to make sure we are scalable and flexible. We came from a state where we were a very small institution, didn't have much going on, to a level that we are collaborating with three institutions and running things operationally well. But our institution is built to grow and make sure that we become a bigger higher ed in Ontario one day in Canada. And we want to make sure when we do that, and then if that happens, we are built to succeed and we have our digital infrastructure and platforms built scalable in that way. So with all of that in mind, we came up with these kind of projects. So we said, well, if we actually talk about projects that are much bigger than this, but we initially said, well, if you're doing a digital transformation, we have two elements. One is a public facing and one is an internal facing. So we started to create a website, but at the same time we started to create an intranet. And then that intranet project snowballed into a portal in the knowledge base, and basically a portal where the actions happen in the knowledge base, where we collect all this information and tell people how the operations work. And all of this happened in collaborations with different departments across all these different institutions. But now our problem is, how do we make sure, like let's say you use SharePoint for something, or you use Confluence on other knowledge bases, etc. And some institutions use D2L for learning, and others use a Blackboard. On the other hand, we have some people using Kali or stuff for ERP. On the other hand, we use Banner. So there's every instance, like if you're talking about 3 infrastructures, everybody's using different tools, and we want to make sure they all work and gel well together. So for that, we created what we call the My Guelph-Humber portal. My Guelph-Humber portal it's an innovative tool which we built in-house, very custom built, almost like an endpoint management tool that we use different APIs, different microservices, and multiple different platforms to kind of make sure that all the data flows internally, and then we triage it out to where it's needed. Let's stop here. So this is what my Guelph-Humber portal looks like. So we have all these different systems which basically funnels into one area, whether it is provided to us by University of Guelph, Humber, a lot of external systems that we use, whether it is Slate, like our recruitment tool, etc. They all are third-party systems, but at the end of the day, they all flow into one area, which is called My Guelph-Humber portal. We make sense of that data. We do a lot of data mining and data visualization to kind of build out of it, and then basically triage that data based on the audience. So for example, if we need to build, once the operations are working as intended and we need to build a knowledge base out of it, hey, we have the Guelph-Humber portal that explains and knows how things are working. On the other hand, we have our Drupal website. We want to make sure only the important information is sent out, or we also want to make sure that the information that we built is not rewritten all the time. Let's say, for example, how many of you have a directory on your website, like an employee directory or anything? Most of them do. But how many of you actually integrate it with your HR portal or something? Or do you actually have to put it separately? Yeah. So that's what we do. So a directory, for example, starts from our onboarding process, even before somebody is an applicant. And we take all that data in, and they come into our HR portal, they get hired, we get through all the HR processes and onboard them. And once they are onboarded, we get that data into our database, and then we publish it live. All of that happens in one automated process, starting from all the external systems coming through my Guelph-Humber, and then passing it on only the essential information to the website. Another example is our events calendar. So we have similar ideas. So we have events happening in all different institutions. We make sure we have integrations with them. We have our own events calendar or events portal. Everything flows through my Guelph-Humber. And then finally, only the public-facing events are now live on the website. Let's go a few steps back. So doing this was no easy task. So we had to first think about all the different platforms we want to use and why we want to use it. So the main areas we said, well, if we have to do this, it has to be around 3 areas. One is we need to know that what kind of audience we are working with. Who is our audience and what kind of platform we want to build for our audience. So with that, we built an audience-centric approach, tailoring content to the needs of the user. Whether if it's internal, then we only get internal news. If you're a public-facing, you get only the public-facing and the reputational things. We also have to worry about, we also thought about what about the content diversity. So we have different means of interactions, and we have to meet all those interactive needs. So that was one of the other areas. And finally, we had to think about the strategic value that we bring with all these platforms. So one of the strategic values really being, one is the user-friendly and marketing material that we want to put out on the website, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure there are some internal processes and collaboration between those processes, whether it's between departments, between institutions, between vendors, etc. So we have those, but moreover, we need to collect data. It's not just that the processes are happening, but we want to know that the processes are operating well. So we collect a lot of logs, we collect a lot. Logs not only help us with bug fixes and all those things, but also it helps us know how our users are interacting with our platform and how they are using this technology, so we can actually grow out of this and make sure that we are scalable and build a better product as we move through the days. And also analytics. So we bring some analytical values. For example, if we're writing blogs or news or media releases, we kind of know how many people are seeing this. Not only through Google Analytics, which is outside, and we know how many people are viewing it from out, but we also want to know how our students are actually interacting with our content. Because we not only write news for our external facing audience, which is outside of our students, but we also want to know how our students are feeling about the news that we write. So we build up a lot of analytics from it and build insights and data models, etc. With that, before we went into building the system, one of the most strategic elements we saw is all the kind of communications. And I did a talk last year at EvolveDrupal that said, how do you distinguish what is a content and what is a data? So we use the same model to kind of distinguish what kind of platforms we need to use and at what point things become data and what times things become content. So for example, we have all communications. One of the ways we decided this, it looks like there's only one parameter, but there are multiple. One of the parameters is this a one-way communication, a communication that you're sending out to people, but you're not receiving anything back from them. Well, that is content. But if you're sending out information like a form, but also collecting information back from them, well, then that's data, because you're collecting information back. So we use that area to kind of display, well, if it's a content or not. But also another means we decided if it's a data or content is a very interesting measure saying, hey, let's say we got hacked. All our Drupal website is hacked. Everything that we use is gone. We don't have anything else. What kind of data, what kind of content are we going to start rebuilding again? We have to rebuild everything, our 4,000 pages from scratch. What are we going to rebuild and what are we unable to do? So one of those are reputational elements. Let's think about if we have something like admission requirements. Admission requirements are something that we can look back into our knowledge bases, etc., and rebuild that content again. But think about some reputational news that you wrote 10 years ago. You can't rewrite that news again. So then, well, that is something we will then consider that reputational element as data, and then goes into that flow. So once we have that, we decided, okay, well, we have content, we know what information is content, what information is data, then let's think about who is this content for, and how much value does it add to us. So if this content is internal, well, then that is knowledge base, because then, it's only for internal audience, so we know what the operating procedures are, etc. But at the same time, is it promotion? Is it reputational? Is it something we want to put it out? Well, then it is a website. And then we also have two other elements of saying, when do we want to use Drupal? When do we want to build a microsite? Microsite in our definition is something that we custom build with no databases or anything in the back end. It's just very promotional value. So we just check on the promotional value of it. Like, is it just a very high promotional value, something like a conference, etc., that we go to the microsite element, otherwise the rest of the content goes on Drupal. But on the data side, we then decided the same thing, like what is the value of this data that we're going to collect from them? Is it just something like a sign-up sheet? Well, why do we need to build a whole form around it or build any automations? We're just trying to collect information from people. At that point, it's a survey. So we then just use our digital standard survey builder called Qualitrans. And on the other hand, if we need automations, it helps with other collaborative units, etc., then we put it on the platform. So we use this kind of metric to kind of every information that flows through to go, which platform do we use, what is the value, how do we use it, what is the strategic vision of this. And then finally, about the cross-platform transition, we wanted to make sure, how do we make sure all of this, as people are moving through platforms, they all feel integrated. They all feel that we have this digital community. How do we feel connected with all the information in all these various different platforms? I only pointed out 5 or 6, but in the background we probably have 10 right How do we make sure? So one, of course, we have a centralized authentication. I know it sounds very simple, like everybody has an authentication system, but for us, it becomes a little more complicated since we are working with 3 different institutions. We have 3 different authentication systems, and it gets very complicated knowing, oh, which one do I authenticate with? Which username do I use for this one versus the other, etc. So we said, well, we're going to standardize. If it's anything related with Guelph-Humber, we're going to standardize with one SSO authentication. We have a unified branding. Again, it sounds very simple, but it took us years to build a unified branding strategy to make sure no matter what platform we use the same colors, the same text, the same fonts, etc. Then we came up with some more ideas such as data integrity. We talked about this before, making sure no matter what platform you use, the authoritative source remains the same. We don't rebuild that data again, we don't rebuild the wheel, no reinvention of the wheel, we just use the same data, keep it consistent, and reuse it for its needs. Again, collaboration with platforms, so we build multiple APIs, we build different tools, reporting systems, etc. to make sure that the right data is leading to the right user base and they are using it and then moving it on to the next area, which we also call an upstream process. So for example, which we kind of move into the content governance or data governance area is when if one area is completed, then your work, the data is completed or the content is completed, it moves on to the next department, to approvals process, etc. And you can now see that data, but you have lost your edit controls on this. So those kind of content governance and data governance structures. And finally, we got into content governance, making sure, and same thing as we saw before, a universal search engine to make sure that no matter what you're searching, your results come up on top. Let's look at this. Okay, so we did all of this in the last 1.5 year, almost 2. Now, with all of this done, we wanted to see what is the future of this project. Where do we go from here? So we have a lot of very cool things running in our platforms. The first one being, we have more systems coming up, we have more data integrations coming up. One of them is very much an endpoint management tool. Currently, when we get an endpoint, we have to manually sit in and find out all the different data areas. We have a developer looking at that data, and etc. But we were trying to build a new endpoint management tool within our databases and connect them with them. So one of the cool things we saw this morning is uniform. So maybe if you've attended that, we'll probably use one of those. Or build our own endpoint management system. Second one is our digital asset management. So currently we use Drupal to kind of take all the photos, our images, our videos, etc. and put it into the Drupal system. But maybe we come up with a new idea of, we already have a digital asset management where we keep all this data. Why do we take these photos out and have to put it into another system? Why not use that? And it's already connected with the model release form, consent forms, etc. So we can actually track which photo we are relating it with. So there we go. So connection with the digital asset management. Another cool thing that we are working on is our AI-powered search engine. So we are using an open source tool called Swirl AI, and what we can do is we build searches and it connects with all our internal tools, whether it is our Guelph-Humber DB, OneDrive, SharePoint, Confluence, our Azure IAM, or with Apache Solr. Apache Solr is what we use on our Drupal site to kind of search through our website. So we use all of these, we connect with all of these different wonderful tools that we use and create one generalized search engine. So one search that searches through all these platforms and produces results, but also at the same time, it scrapes that data and delivers some relevant information dynamically. So for example, I can search for a news article that was written, or I can just search for how many people saw this news today, and that search engine will actually produce the result and produce the logs as well. Lastly, we are also working on analytics and data-driven strategy building, basically creating a centralized system to measure internal and external engagement. We are kind of working on that. So basically, we have our internal logs and data that we collect from all the operations that we have, but also we are connecting with Google Analytics and other analytical tools that we use on different platforms to basically centralize that data and make sense of it when we want to use it. And we can see how we can grow using that data, so we can build strategies for innovation moving forward. We are also sending like notifications and insight strategies. So for example, if we say, hey, for example, one of the fun stuff that we have with academia is academic misconduct when people are cheating or plagiarism, etc. So we try to put in that data and see. In this month, we were expecting about 50 applications for misconduct, but it has gone down drastically. We only received 25. Well, that's a good thing. So that will help us with our student successes. It gives us notifications saying, you set the threshold of how much operations or how many different forms of operations that you need to get. But now we got less or we got high, so we can adjust our strategies accordingly. For example, if I got more than 50 applications for plagiarism, that's when we would go and talk to the instructors and say, hey, maybe there's a fault in the way that you're teaching, because we usually were expecting 50, but now we are getting 75. Or we can go down and say, hey, we were expecting 50, but we got 25, so maybe you're doing something good, and we should do, maybe you can learn from that and give it to the rest of the instructors. Something like that. We also have working on something called Drupal embedded data plugins. So this is a plugin that comes with our CK Editor 5. Trying to work with some of the institutional data where we collected all of them in a centralized unit, so we can use that again and again. For example, one of the things we have is tuition fees. So if we publish tuition fees in multiple different areas of the website, and it's hard to find out every single area that we use that and update it every time something that changes. So if we use embedded data, we collect that data through operations in my Guelph-Humber portal. We just use that data, and once that is updated, it's updated everywhere in every pages of the website. And lastly, student success tracking. So because now we know every operations for academia, administration, comms, everything happens in one place. We know how a student is performing, where did they come from? In fact, in terms of our prospect management system, how did they interact with Guelph-Humber? What was their experience at Guelph-Humber? What did they do? How many times were they caught cheating? How many times were they caught doing something good? Or what extracurriculars have they attended? What kind of events did they have? Well, we get all that data. And finally, we can also see them after their success to see, okay, so where are they now? So how many alumni events they came, etc. So we can track everything, and then using those student success trackings, we finally know what is our strategy for growth from here, and how we can make our students a better person in the society. So well, that was it from my end. Any questions about what we just learned? Yeah, that's everything from the University of Guelph-Humber, what we're working on, what our future is. Also, just big round of applause to our developers who are in the audience as well, Abhijit and Anjali. Thank you so much.